When color correcting your shots, you need several important tools at your disposal, and one of the most important tools you need are your eyes. Why? Well, videoscopes, which measure video signal in very specific units, don't do you very much good unless they know what part of the image is supposed to be a certain value. You need your eyes and your brain to say what parts of the image are supposed to be white, which parts are supposed to be black. Is it generally bright or dark? Is there a color cast? And so on. So in this movie, we'll talk about all of the questions you need to ask yourself before you even approach a videoscope. First of all, you need to ask yourself what part of the image is supposed to be white. Well, the lightest part of John's shirt and Susie's sleeve are definitely supposed to be white and will serve as our reference white point. It looks like, in general, our highlights are a little dark, so we're going to have to raise our highlights to the proper level. Secondly, you need to ask yourself what in the image is supposed to be black. Well, the background here and the shadows underneath here are definitely the darkest parts of the image. They do look a little too dark, like if we raised the shadow level, we would see a little more detail in those shadows. So overall, the entire image is too dark. We're going to have to raise our shadows a little bit too. Third, how is the contrast? Well, the contrast, or range of luminance from the lightest part of the image to the darkest part of the image, is a little flat. We need to open up our tonal range a bit, and I especially think that by raising our whites, that should help out a lot. Fourth, is there a color cast? Well, it looks like there is a bluish color cast over everything. If we added some warmth back into the image, it would definitely help things out. And finally, how is the saturation level, especially in the flesh tones? Well, our flesh tones are fairly gray, so we'll probably need to bump up the saturation as well as warm those up so they're more accurate. All right, let's move down to Susie here. So what is supposed to be white? Well, we've got some glinting glass in the background here, but I want to talk about that for a moment. When you have reflections, like off of glass or water or a light shining into the camera, that's called a specular highlight. And when you have those, you should be careful when you're defining your whites. That is, when you're color correcting something with a specular highlight, just keep in mind that the true values of white are generally lower than the reflection value. That said, there aren't too many true white values in Susie herself, so the lightest parts of the image are probably the lightest parts of her face here. So in general, we'll need to raise the highlights because they're too dark. But definitely keep in mind that we're not going to define white by our specular highlights here. Now, what's supposed to be black? Well, the darkest parts of the image are right here in the shadows of her neck. We'll definitely want to darken those up a bit, but probably won't be going all the way to black. How's the contrast? Well, we've got a really flat image here. The shadows are too light and the highlights are too dark. We'll need to fix that so that we can open up the tonal range and get an image with much more contrast. Is there a color cast? Well, we may have a slight warmish color cast, but then again, there are a lot of warm tones in this image. We'll have to take a look at that, but in general, I don't think the color balance is too off. And then how is the saturation? The image could definitely use a bump in saturation. Once we correct our blacks and whites and get the colors looking good, increasing the saturation will particularly help out in her flesh tones. All right, so as you can see, even before we start looking how the videoscopes measure these images, we already have a pretty good idea of where we want to go in correcting them. So let's keep all of this in mind as we start taking a look at the videoscopes as we gather even more information about our shots.